Hello everyone. Welcome back to Resident Evil 4. So, I did the thing again. This is future David, not past David, who you've been listening to for most of this playthrough. So, as with, I believe it was episode 11, something went wrong with this recording. So it did, thankfully, record in-game audio, but it did not record my mic feed. So unfortunately, I'm recording this audio commentary months after the fact, after the whole series is complete, in fact. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I would rather, have some kind of continuity, particularly for, the ongoing dialogue from episode to episode, because I rewatched 14 and I rewatched 16 just to make sure, I wouldn't retread territory with this one. But I don't know if what I'm going to cover is necessarily covered in other episodes. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but on the positive side, it is better to have lost my commentary audio rather than losing the in-game audio, because that's a lot harder to deal with. I would have to re-record the whole section. So, welcome to the island, everyone. So, the island is a sort of a contentious area in the game. The island is I think a lot of the Resident Evil games in general kind of run into... Oh, there's JJ. Resident Evil games in general kind of infamously have this issue of maybe going on a little bit too long, or they have a section, especially towards the end of the game, where it's kind of like... There's kind of this feeling that the game could have... closed itself up a little bit sooner than it did. So I actually got hit from this distance, dang. So, like in Resident Evil 7, like almost everybody agrees that the boat section right at the end is not only unnecessary, but like the gameplay is in some regards like weaker than the rest of that game. On top of which it came to be like after you had already been playing for several hours, so it's kind of like, you're maybe getting to a place where you're feeling like ready for the game to sort of draw itself to a conclusion, but you don't get to have it. You have to keep playing, and you have to keep playing through a section that is, in many regards, more repetitious than anything you've done so far, kind of visually uglier than anything you've done so far, and you're also, I don't know, just kind of waiting for the game to conclude. It happens, as I said, in quite a few of the games. I think a lot of the lab stuff towards the end of Resident Evil 1 is kind of similar. Frankly, the lab stuff at the end of like Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake, there's something very similar there as well. The fact that the Resident Evil games always end on these kind of like industrial lab areas is cliche to a point that I think that like people don't, people will meme about it, but like it's genuinely also criticism. Like people kind of getting tired of the franchise doing it, even in the case of the best games in the franchise. It's kind of it's still a problem even in those games. So that's a problem in this game too, or at least, I guess depending on who you're talking to. I don't hate the island. I don't hate any of the sequences I talked about. Actually, I actually quite like the nest in RE2 Remake. the ship in RE7 I think is probably rightfully criticized, but I don't hate it. It goes faster than I think people sometimes want to admit to. Yeah, the nest is actually kind of cool. The labs at the end of RE1, I think maybe are a good example of this, but the sort of slightly more generic industrial aesthetic doesn't necessarily prompt a desire to keep exploring, which I think is a really big part of the issue. If you were dropped in something that was really, really strange and really, really interesting, I think more people wouldn't mind the games being of this length. But, you know, this, especially I think in retrospect, this section is like this weird generic military shooter vibe. This was like way before Call of Duty became a modernized series, so that's not so much a thing, but just like with soldiers now instead of like the Spanish village or Spanish castle, just kind of you know, these gray concrete corridors, sandbags. I don't know. It's not nearly as memorable in some regards. Though I do think that the island has a lot of positives to it. In fact, I think it has some of the scariest enemies in the game. The regenerators we will be seeing next episode. It has a few cool boss fights. It has some good moments. But I think that there is an argument to be made that, like, this part of the game could have been trimmed a little bit, and in particular, there's at least one boss sequence we'll see later that like almost everyone universally agrees is kind of I don't know. It feels like filler, which is strange because it's a unique boss with a unique rig. Like, it's uniquely animated, it has like a unique silhouette, and the mechanics of the boss fight, at least the first portion of it, are quite different from any other boss fight in the game, so it's weird that people would call that filler, but I kind of think it is. We'll get there later. I won't spoil that too much, but there's a lot of boss fights. There's kind of more rooms of these soldier guys that aren't really interesting or challenging, especially because if you've been playing somewhat optimally up to this point, you're probably moving towards being, like, not even optimally, I shouldn't have used that word. If you are playing not poorly, you probably have a decent amount of ammo and decently upgraded guns. Not inherently, and like depending on, you know, specific choices you make, you might have not been great at saving certain kinds of ammo, or you might have invested a little too much money upgrading a gun that you later got rid of. But I don't know, like, there's also certain weapons that are just better than others, like the fact that I'm playing with the Red 9 right now. We've talked about that a little bit, that like I think at least the Red 9 is almost unquestionably the best handgun in the game, because its max damage is practically like a shotgun. But I don't know. The corridor thing, I do think it's kind of funny. That's like a criticism, like the grayness and the military aesthetic being really generic. This is a criticism that I think has actually gotten stronger over time, and some of that relates to some of the context surrounding like how we look back on this era of gaming, rather than it is something that people were necessarily observing in that moment. So in particular, like, this came out in 2005, so we're, you know, barely in, like, we've just kind of started the war on terror, like not long after the invasion in Iraq. Not that Japan was part of it per se, but like the way that we are talking about media, the way that we are like American tastes are kind of heavily influential to global aesthetics. I'm pointing out there that window showed a treasure on an alternate path that we are just now able to see. But anyway, like American aesthetics have a huge impact globally because of how much media we produce. And this game may be somewhat sympathetic with that moment in American aesthetics, was at that time I think considered fairly novel, and was being complimented for some sense of realism, which isn't to say reality, like that, like this isn't realistic, but realism as like this aesthetic ideal, like some perception of what we what feels real, even if it is not actually real. Is in this moment I think was more complimented than criticized, and in retrospect, people were really critical of this moment. Some of the criticism I'm actually seeing is starting to let up now into the 2020s. Like, there's still plenty to critique, but I think that people aren't as harsh as they once were. Like in the early 2010s, kind of like the later Obama years, I think that people were really looking back on this era and being really critical of like the grimdark, everything is gray and sepia and gritty. But there's maybe we've gotten enough distance on it. People are maybe now understanding that this was a moment culturally that people were, producing something that felt honest and felt sort of aesthetically real to them in that moment. But yeah, the idea of going from these, like, the village, which is super interesting, and the castle, which is super beautiful, to this great military shooter, I do think has aged especially poorly, and I can also understand that. Oh, we also get this weird ass mural on the wall, by the way. I think I take a look at it here. Yeah, so it's really weird, and I think I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's supposed to be like vaguely Central American, like sort of referencing Aztec or Incan murals, which is kind of a funny, strange thing, and I have to wonder at times if the developers like were conflating Spanish-speaking territories of like Spain and Central America, even though there's no reason why the indigenous peoples of Central America would have a cave mural in an island off of Spain. I don't know. That's not much worth musing on, I suppose. But I will say one thing that I like about the island a lot, for all of its sort of genericness in this moment, with soldiers and whatnot, I do feel like the idea of the bio-weapon, of course. Oh, nice! I actually got to shoot his dynamite. The bio-weapon, of course, is super fundamental, like core to the Resident Evil franchise. But like we never really get an illustration of what that would be in a practical sense. almost never, I should say. Like Mr. X is a pretty good illustration of the idea. I'm shooting for the barrel. There we go. Oh. Mr. X is a decent example of the idea, and in Resident Evil Damnation, I believe is what it's called, the second CGI film, we see a couple tyrants there who are like well implemented. But for the most part in these games, I feel like in this franchise, I should say, like the story of the franchise is these uncontrollable outbreaks. Never actual like military implementation of bioweapons as weapons. They're more like wild animals. They're like they are bioweapons, as the Japanese title of the franchise signifies. This section of the game, I think, is kind of interesting. At contrast with the rest of the game, because the village is a little bit strange and ambiguous, but like the castle kind of informs the village and is like, okay, the Plagas can be used for mind control, and it sort of makes sense that this like religious cult has emerged as the product of mind control. But whatever, that's just like megalomaniac, supervillain stuff. That's not necessarily... I don't think it's doing a lot of labor to illustrate the idea of these engineered organisms being weapons that can be utilized in a true industrial capacity. And military industrial, I should say, more specifically. This section kind of expands and really shows like zombies as bioweapon is stupid. Tyrant as bioweapon makes sense. But they also seem like impractical in some ways, particularly like when you see them, like they go out of control, like when they usually are implied to have some kind of like garment or like armature on their body that is meant to control their mutations. You see that with Mr. X in the RE2 remake. You see that with and then we had a thing we could have you see it with the RE2 remake. Mr. X, his arm goes crazy. Nemesis, similarly, he like mutates out of control after you've destroyed his clothing. And you get a similar thing with Vendetta and Damnation, the second and third CGI Resident Evil films. In Damnation, we see tyrants where, again, like once their sort of control harnesses are destroyed or removed, they like mutate like crazy, and then similar thing happens in Damnation. Like there's a bioweapon who's like perpetually wearing one and has it voluntarily removed so that he can mutate and become this beastly powerful thing. So those kind of make sense. The hunters in RE1 kind of make sense, but like those, well, they actually make a lot of sense. They're probably the best illustration that we've had in the game, so in the game franchise so far. But like in terms of like the mooks, so to speak, the like random guys, the henchmen, the zombies, like the standardized enemies that you get across these games, we don't really get to see them being used as bioweapons, and I guess like arguably in the case of the T-Virus games, like they really aren't the bioweapon, they're almost incidental. But yeah, there's a new Magnum, by the way, Killer 7, which is named after the video game Killer 7, which also came out on the Gamecube and was part of the Capcom deal to release 5 original games exclusively to the Gamecube, one of which was Killer 7, and then another was Resident Evil 4. I don't think that the deal was ever even completed. I believe they, I think that Piano 3 was another one that like shooter where the shooting lady kind of danced. It was almost like sci-fi Bayonetta in a sense, but it was she would like dance and shoot rhythmically.
What are you buying?
Anyway, they throw out this reference to Killer 7 as I don't know if it's really cross promotion per se, but
Thank you.
I like the idea that we see the Ganados in this section. Oh, and then this increases the firing speed beyond the weapon's threshold. It's the exclusive upgrade to our automatic rifle. That basically makes it so that there's no delay between shots. Like, it's a relatively quick firing speed once it's fully upgraded. As is, 1.83 isn't bad, but this basically makes it as fast as you can tap the button, you can take shots, practically. Which makes it super good. It kind of stands at conflict in a sense with certain design choices in the game, in that, like, by the time you probably have that, you don't have unlimited ammo for it, and like if you do a new game plus or whatever, like, you're still not finding a ton of ammo, on top of which, you know, by the time you're doing new game pluses, you're gonna probably shoot to get like the Chicago typewriter, which is a super powerful assault rifle. It's a Tommy gun, I should say, that has unlimited ammo. So anyway,
what are you buying?
I think it's cool to see the Ganados militarized. I think it makes sense. I think it is very... I don't know. I think it's like a good example of how, like, this mind control cult thing that's going on isn't just a power fantasy for a megalomaniac, but instead has this, like, broader goal or something. Oh, I love this, by the way. I get, yeah, shot penetration across all those guys in this narrow corridor. Cool. I did good there. Good job, cast me. The fact that this isn't just this, like, megalomaniac power trip, that he has, like, his own personal slaves or something, and we're actually seeing, like, this bigger goal that, like, some of the aesthetic trappings of the cult that he was assembling are kind of shallower, maybe, than, I don't know, like, it was a convenient thing with Salazar, who I think is implied to be this true believer. Like, to get Salazar, you have to sort of convince him to believe in the cult, and, like, getting Salazar is kind of crucial because getting Salazar is kind of crucial because that whole region is, like, very much under his thumb. Can't read that text. I think it says recycle at the top, but I see the word glass. I don't know. Another one of my absolute favorite camp lines is coming up. I'm sure I must have highlighted it. Can't see anything through there. But I think this really shows how malicious Sadler's ultimate intentions were. Like, he doesn't buy into his own cult, I don't think. Like, he is, like, putting together this kind of... Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe he does believe, but still, it's like he's not, like, I think showing the sophistication of this operation and the idea that he's, like, kitting these soldiers out with armor, with helmets, with, like, modern weapons. He doesn't have guns, really, other than JJ, but... I think that's like a gameplay balance thing, more so than it is, no. Cans and jars, all non-perishables. Reminds me of my days at the ORE. Which I think is the training center for the Raccoon City Police or something like that. I can't remember. Anything else in here? I don't recall. Watch out, there's a jump scare coming up, by the way. We got some sides of beef over here, but a flaming man is going to jump out shortly. Here's my favorite line. Here we go. Rotten beef that Leon's looking at. We'll check it. This horrible rotten beef that has, like, gross maggots and stuff all over it, and it's, like, obviously been out. This meat's rotten, but I sure could use a fat, juicy steak right about now. Oh, Leon. I think those are garlic things. Something's in the oven also. That I didn't remember. I guess we have these big propane things because those are probably what, like, fuels the ovens. Like, they don't have, like, a, you know, they don't have a feed. This is an island, so they need that. But jump scare warning, everybody. A guy is gonna jump out of this thing. Another one of my favorite lines. Had to come up. So that's just a chamber full of fire. Leon investigates. Come on. Come on past me. We can do it. We can investigate why the guy was in there. Oh no, or do I investigate his body? No, I guess no, I think we investigate it. What was he doing in here? Yeah, great, weird lucidity on Leon's part, I would say. We got these big wash tubs with some rubber gloves. I love these details. Anyway, I think, man, it's dirty. Good observational skills, Leon. This whole section, I also think, connects to some of the other zombie movie stuff that we've talked about in some of the other episodes. I do think that these games are really informed by other zombie media, and I think that the idea of training zombies or turning zombies into a military force is not something foreign to the zombie film genre. It shows up quite a bit, and the idea of trained zombies or attempting to train zombies is a sort of a recurrent concept. And I think, I mean, again, we've talked a little bit about how Ganados are, they're not zombies, but they are zombies. Oh, hello, Ashley. Somewhere there's gonna be a big tough guy. I always call them cyborgs, which they're not cyborgs, they're just wearing armor. They're wearing, like, weird Mad Max armor. Big old hammers. Yeah, spiky pauldrons and a spiky cuirass. I always forget how to pronounce that word. But, like, the big, I don't know. In 60s, 70s, early 80s, you do get some things where zombies handle weapons because, like, so many of the conventions of the genre haven't been super well established. Especially simple weapons, like zombies generally don't use guns. There's a recurring joke in Dawn of the Dead about this one zombie who's kind of obsessed with guns, and he whenever possible steals a gun from the protagonists. Oh, and there's part 3 progress. So, you know, these things had existed for a while, but, like, I think one of the really big innovations, as it were, in the, like, history of zombies was with Romero's Day of the Dead. Used a flash grenade before another one of these guys sprouted. I believe they can instant kill you. I think it's super rare, though. I'm not positive. It, like, happens so infrequently, I never remember if they do. But in Romero's Day of the Dead, for people who don't know it, like, besides the fact that it takes place in a military base, and it is this kind of, like, decrepit thing in a certain sense, then they're, like, running out of resources and they're sort of subterranean, and lots of storage. That sort of makes sense for Though I think it's sort of, at some point or another, I think it's vaguely established that, like, whether or not Ganados eat, what in the world were they eating here? Whether or not Ganados eat, or like how much they eat, or like what's up with their metabolism is like a weird thing that kind of gets addressed a little bit in this like exocanonical material that, like, I don't know, it's a little bit ambiguous, but which is why all their food is rotting. Like, I don't know if they like lost all appetite or something or what, but anyway, in Romero's Day of the Dead, besides the fact that it literally takes place in a military base, like, there is this like explicitly addressed subplot in the film. In fact, it's one of it's pretty important to the main plot, that the scientist Dr. Logan is trying to train a zombie, and the zombie does in fact use a gun eventually in the film, like somewhat with some difficulty, but like the idea that zombies can be trained was something that Romero was kind of interested in. 20 years later, oh,
Ashley.
there she is. I don't really like this scene. There's no actual assault, so anyone who's opposed to that, it's more just like this peculiar trapping of, I don't know, there's something weird and vaguely threatening about this scene that I really don't like.
Just hang in there, Ashley. I'm coming for you.
But anyway, Romero would return to this. Oh, they've turned off the camera. Again, it's kind of a gross scene. I don't like it. Oh my god, a bunch of drawings and stuff. In Land of the Dead, which would have just come out like a year before this game, Romero kind of like touched upon the idea that like zombies have maybe very slowly been evolving, or very slowly been getting smarter over time. And there is this kind of like zombie uprising against this last group of humans in their area who have been, I don't know, like it sort of presents zombies in an interesting way, but I don't know. It's a thing that I think most zombie media shies away from, because there is this question of like, if you give zombies weapons, or if you make zombies smart enough and capable enough, like, are they still really zombies, or are they just like guys? Which I guess is accurate. They are just guys. But I don't know. This sort of makes sense for me in illustrating a more practical and pseudo-tactical use of bioweapons. You know, the problem with hunters and tyrants is that like the resources required to make them is absolutely like crazy. Like they seem to be really, really effective, but like they're effective in one sense, but like their ability to reproduce is so limited. Are they really as effective as, you know, putting money into like drones or something? The idea though of like a virally spreading or like parasitically spreading mind control thing, so that like any population you just want to like transform into labor and human force weapons feels more believable to me in some capacity. Like believable in the sense that it's like viable as a some kind of cruel and evil military strategy, where it's like
got some rare things on sale, stranger.
What do we get around?
What are you buying?
Oh, tactical vest, very cool. Yeah, reduces damage taken by 30%. And nothing new here, though I could get the rifle upgrade. I think I got the tac vest. Yeah, which also changes Leon's model, which is kind of cool. And just reducing damage is good, because I would argue like the biggest problem with, or like one of the toughest things with the island, I should say, is that the amount of damage you take is much higher. Like, the enemies you're generally dispatching pretty well, but like if you get hit, they're hitting hard.
Thank you. What are you buying?
And then I don't think that we have anything other than...
What are you
They might
buying?
have upgraded just guns I don't have, or there's new upgrade
What are you
options to
selling?
guns we don't have. So I don't know. Within the larger scheme of the Resident Evil series, I'd also add that the zombie training thing also actually shows up in one of the live-action Resident Evil films. So it came out after this. I think the third Resident Evil film is called Extinction, I believe. It's the one that's like pseudo Mad Maxy. Like, it's like the entire United States has become this like giant desert. And Alice and this crew with Carlos and... Man, who else is there? Carlos, Claire... This crew is traveling cross-country. And I think we now have access to all the games, by the way, which I eventually beat them all. In that one, there is what is very plainly a nod to George Romero's Day of the Dead. Like, those live-action Resident Evil movies in general have all these weird, like, pseudo-plagiarized... Not plagiarized, but I mean, like, they really feel fan-fiction-y at times. I don't necessarily recommend people watch through that series, but, like, if you ever do, if you've seen Westworld, like HBO's Westworld, and want to watch a fun, dumb zombie movie, the fifth live-action Resident Evil film, Retribution... I actually think it's like one of the more fun live-action Resident Evils, because there's like a lot of fan service. Leon actually shows up in that one. Ada shows up in that one, and they like recreate scenes from this game in it. But Retribution is like weird Westworld fan fiction. But yeah, the third film, Extinction, what did we do? Nice. 3 more prizes. Has, what's his name? Man, I'm not going to remember a character from the film series. It has, the main villain in that one is likewise trying to train zombies, and he actually does it successfully. But for all the things that I have issues with in the live action Resident Evil films, like the idea of this umbrella group training zombies, or like attempting to utilize zombies as an actual bioweapon, I feel like is ironically something we never actually see in the games. Like in the Resident Evil games, like the zombies are largely a unfortunate byproduct, not necessarily something that's supposed to be like the main weapon, because the zombies in Resident Evil, like the first few games, are the result of the T virus. And the T virus was created with the purpose of creating tyrants. Like, everything else was just mad science, like stuff gone wrong, and then eventually an outbreak, which is how we end up with zombies. So it's kind of weird, but most of the games, the main enemies are an accident, I guess. At least for 0, 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica, kind of. I guess there's arguments to be made about how purposeful some of this situation was, and what players were engineering the circumstances to be what they are. But I don't know. That's a bigger conversation for a bigger day. But yeah, 4 was kind of like the game where the main enemy type were purposefully, arguably, the main product of the plan. Oh yeah, this door. Almost died. 2 dynamites at once. Ow. So this had it, 5 had it, and 5 are kind of like an extension of what is going on in this game. 6 was a purposeful uncontrolled outbreak, but like sort of hard to. 6's plot I'm not enormously well versed in, and I'm entirely okay with maintaining that standard. Oh, these guys are hands. I forgot about that. And the door magically stays open now that the guys are dead. Well, we're running up close to the end of the episode here, so I hope that none of this is repeating stuff you've already heard in previous episodes, or at least not extensively. And I hope that there isn't some kind of continuity break that I hope in some later episode that I didn't review that I don't reference back to something that I might have said in this. But we're getting into the island now. Some of the cooler parts of the island are going to sort of come up next episode, I think. As said, I don't think the island's all bad. I think that there are some positives to it, and in particular, the regenerators we will be seeing soon are famously, I think, one of the coolest and most beloved and also most feared enemies of the whole franchise, because they are genuinely unsettling, and they're difficult, and they're weird, and they're unpredictable. They're cool. They're really, really cool. So, anyway, I hope you all are having fun with this. Again, I apologize for the audio issue. I don't want to jinx myself and say, once again, oh, I hope there's no more videos where I lost my mic audio and have to re-record it months later. But I'm putting it out there. I'm putting it out there that I hope that's the case, but I don't know if it will be. So, thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next episode, back with Past Me.